Okay, so there is an important point I would like to talk about. If not, I've not talked about that point with you, or okay, let me start over. There is an important point that I would like to talk about, and this point concerns me directly. And what I'm concerned about is that when I wake in the morning, I feel as if I don't want to speak. I feel as if there's kind of layers, invisible layers, which separates me from the being that I express myself as before I go to bed, and the being that I express myself as when I wake in the morning. There are two different beings, but in the way I see it, in my mind basically, because it's kind of, I really feel that I get sucked into my mind when I dream, when I sleep. Because when I wake, I feel so kind of compressed within a space which doesn't want me to speak. And this space which doesn't want me to speak, I don't have a better expression, or I don't have better words to say what I'm trying to say, but this space where I find myself when I wake in the morning is like, okay, don't speak to yourself. Don't speak out loud. Do not speak. Stay in your mind. If you stay in your mind, everything is going to be fine. If you stay in your mind, nobody will notice that you don't have a good speaking vocabulary. Nobody will notice that you don't want to speak to nobody. If you stay in your mind, then everything will be fine. Everything will be silent. Everything will be hippie. It's not that there's a voice in me that says that, but it's more of the way I feel. If I can put words with the way that I feel, those would be the words. Now I'm looking into me because I want to transcend this point. So, in order to transcend this point, let's have a look at what I experienced as soon as I became aware of being awake today. And usually, I'm not aware of my waking self. It's not when I just wake up and get out of bed that I'm aware of my waking self. Usually I'm aware of my waking self at least maybe an hour before I wake up, before I get out of bed. And within this waking up, first impulse of waking up, there's always this kind of back idea or backdrop idea that tells me you don't need to wake up right now. You can stay in bed. If you stay in bed, you can relax some more and maybe dream some more. And you won't have to face your day, and you just can keep on dreaming and being in some happy land. Happy places where you speak with people, where you're popular, where you have adventures, where your life is not boring, where there's some change, where things happen instead of staying the same. So that's what I have when I wake up, or when I first have the awareness of being in my wakeful state as opposed to my sleep state. So this originates from my subconscious mind, because I have programmed myself to seek silence, to seek a technique basically that would, a big spider on my desk, I'll let it live. So I'm gonna move in a week, so I don't mind if there's a big spider. Spider will be taken care of by the other roommate, which will take my place. So let the spider live. Okay. So going back to what I feel like in the morning. Now the spider is spinning a web. Nice. Nice big spider. You know what? I think I'll go get a cup and I'll free the spider. I'll release the spider. Because right now she's building a web on my desk and this I don't really want. So I'll edit this out later on. But now, I get the cup, the magic cup, which will release the spider. Come on, Peter. Speed him in. Okay. Okay, so now the spider is gone. Okay, so now that the spider is gone, I can get back to what I was saying, which is important for me because this mind space within which I find myself when I awake in the morning can stay with me for hours and hours and hours, maybe all day long. Like for today as an example, I stayed inside that unwilling state of to participate in this world, unwillingness to speak to people. Like every time I spoke to people when I'm in this state, I kind of always, it's like I'm in the back of my mind. There's like two sections in my mind the way I see it. It's like when I wake, it's like I stay in the back of my mind. And I hide myself the furthest that I can in the back of my mind, of my head. It's as if my sense of self is somewhere in the back of my head. And as the day gradually forwards, I always question myself, like when I'm in that state. I do forgiveness, I look into me, but there's always something which doesn't want me to do all of that. Always something which says, this is forced, you don't want to look into you don't want to apply self-forgiveness, you don't want to get out of this zone. But I want to get out of this fucking zone. I don't want to be stuck in this fucking zone in my mind, which makes me doubt myself all the time, which makes me see myself as being like stuck and as if I don't have no power to get out, to speak to people, to express myself. And this originates from my past. It originates from my past experiences where it even goes as far as when I was young. When I remember when I was with my father and when I was kind of two wills basically, my will and the will of my father. And I remember like when I was young, sometimes I wanted to stay outside and play with my friends, but my father said, come on, come home, Alex. You have to do the dishes, or you have to do this, or you have to do that. And I remember one specific incident where I said no, and then when I came back, he slapped me with his belt, the metal buckle of the belt, and he slapped me on the back. And I was bleeding and bubble of blood on my back, and my sister was crying and I was crying, and I kind of developed within my mind from this point the idea that I cannot stand against, but my expression is not, is powerless basically, that my self-expression, that I better keep my expression to myself and not say what I want to other people. Because if I say what I want to other people, I'm going to be beaten, I'm going to be hurt, I'm going to be like contradicted. And because I said no to my father, I said I don't want you to beat me when he was beating me. I said please stop, but he kept on beating me. I was crying and I expressed my disagreements and towards his action on me, but it wasn't worth it. That's how I perceived it, because no matter what I said, he kept on beating me. So the only release that I had from this kind of abuse was my mother. And every time my mother was there, I knew that because my mother was there, my father wouldn't touch me, wouldn't beat me. So I always ran to my mother, and she was my protector, basically. And this kind of mother matrix figure is what I have built in my mind subconsciously as a foundation of my identity. Because going back to my childhood, when I was being abused by my father, it was in a moment where I was building my identity, the core of my identity as Alex Parkinson, as who I am in this physical body. And what the opposing force of that my father exhibited towards me was my mother. And my mother was like seen by me and by my sisters as the great angel being, the great goddess, the one who's there to save us all from the abuse of the tyrant, which is the father, and which later became society and all of this system, outside system, which forces me to do things that I don't want to do. And yeah, there are many parallels there. So I see the foundation of my identity as being when I was a child with my father and my mother. Father matrix system, the mother matrix system. And those two systems are in my mind within the greater system of my mind consciousness system. And it's like there are two allocation points which I give power to those systems within me. And since I perceive kind of this greater whole, this greater outside exterior life, society, systems, as being a sign of, or analogous to the authority figure of my father, basically. Well, and since my father was abusing me most of the time when I was young, either verbally or physically, since my mother was the only safe haven that I had to save me from the tyranny of my father, I kept this kind of system within me as I went to school, as I went to high school, as I went to university. I kept this kind of system within me that as soon as I saw an opposition, as soon as there was something out there which was harassing me, either psychologically or physically, I ran. Well, since my mother wasn't there all the time with me, I created the mother figure in my mind. And the mother figure that I created in my mind is the space within which I always wish to be within and as. And this space I have defined through my life experience as being a space where I kind of put buffers all around, kind of a bubble in my mind, and the buffers kind of filter the stimuli that come from the outside as the authority of the outside, as, let's say, the system, as a system which tells me I have to do this, I have to do that to survive, I have to do that, I have to make money to survive, I have to do this, I have to have that, I have to work, I have to be somebody else, I have to do things that I don't want to do because I need to survive, and because I need to survive I have to be subservient to others and the will of others, basically. So all this related to my idea that I had when I was young of my will and the will of my father. My father was the will who was directing me, controlling me, telling me what to do, and my will was the will who told me, no, I don't want to do that. Why do I have to clean the dishes? Why do I have to clean the sink when it's dirty? Why do I have to get inside when you tell me to get inside? Why do I have to stop playing when you tell me to stop playing? So all those kind of conflicts, I mean all those kind of different perspectives, as my perspective and my father's perspective, which later became the society's perspective, created within me a bubble. Because in the bubble, The bubble was maintained and nourished by my mother. The bubble where I found myself secure was maintained and nourished by my mother, by the relationship that I had with my mother in my early childhood. Because as soon as my father was harassing me, I ran to my mother. And when I was with my mother, I felt secure and safe from my father. So by feeling secure and safe, I placed my mother within me, so that when she wasn't there, I would have her inside me. I would have that space inside me for me to go to, and within that space I would be able to feel secure, as the same feeling that I had when I was with my mother in her presence physically with me. I felt secure from my father because my father couldn't do a thing when my mother was there. He didn't harass me physically, he didn't abuse me psychologically or physically. He just showed another face, the face of a father who is loving and caring, like a two-sided face that my father had with me. So also another point is that I never really trusted my father. I never really saw that my father loved me, because I saw the two faces of him. So that he tried to buy me love. I remember that every time he beat me, or he saw that I was crying, he came to me and said, and gave me money. He said, look, $20, go buy yourself some things now. Look, let's go buy fishes for your fish tank. Look, let's go buy turtles for your fish tank. Or look, let's go buy stuff to make you happy. Now that I have made you cry, I'm gonna go and buy stuff to correct my actions. But this didn't really sound or resonate with me as being something that some actions which were honest, which were like I said as being he only wanted to correct himself, but he kept on doing it. He kept on beating me, even though he bought me stuff afterwards. And also my mother told me later on that every time he beat me, he cried in the bed and he said, why did I do that, why do I do that, etc. But he kept on doing it. So going back to my mother, she is that figure that I stick with, that I kept within me as that space where I feel secure. And all throughout my life, every time I had troubles with either people around me, either bullies at school, every time I had problems and my mother wasn't there, I ran to that space in my mind. And when I was in that space in my mind, it's kind of something tells me that I don't need to speak because my mother will speak for me. That I don't need to express myself in front of the opposition because my mother will do it for me. So basically I kind of ran. And that space is a space where I put myself in a fetal position. I kind of wait, all locked up inside a fetal position, and I wait. I wait that the trauma goes away. I wait that the pain goes away. I wait that the abuse goes away. I hate that the boredom go away. Everything that is against my will, I hate that I wait that it goes away. And this space, since it's a space that I have cherished so much, because of believing that I needed my mother to save me from my father, well, that space has been inserted inside my subconscious mind as being a defining attribute of my identity. And since I've nourished it over and over again as I grew in my beingness, in my adulthood, it's really still there. And right now, what I'm doing to myself when I am intimate with myself is I try to remove this space, because I want to get back that power that I gave to my mother, which has now become a space which is secluded from the outside, a space which secludes itself, within which I seclude myself from the outside. This secluded area in my mind which tells me I need to protect myself, which tells me I need to protect myself from everybody else, which tells me do not show who you truly are to everybody else, because if you show who you truly are, you will invite opposition. You will invite a will which will try to overpower you You will invite a will which will be in contradiction with your will, and thus you will invite pain, suffering, and conflicts within yourself. So that space, when I'm with that space, it tells me to keep silent. That the space within which I'm in will take care of everything for me. And since my mother is not there to express herself with words to my father, basically to tell him, don't do this, you're hurting your child when you beat him, or stop doing it, if you continue I'm gonna divorce you. That's what she said sometimes. But that, since my mother is not there, that space, I believe that this space still speak for me. But what it speak for me is a apathetic, or maybe that's not the term, but apathy. I'm kind of apathetic. Sorry, I'm French, so maybe words sometimes I have difficulty in pronouncing in English, or maybe they're not the same words as I'm thinking, but still I'm trying to say that it's as if I'm a kind of limp. I walk, zombie, yeah, a zombie. I'm like a zombie. I walk, and I'm just a shell of myself walking by, looking at life, walking, looking at things, but always from a distance, because I locate myself within that space, which is now so small. Because when I was young, to do another analogy, when I was young, my father figure was like, well, was all that my mother wasn't, basically. My mother was there was the source who protected me, showed me love, care, everything which is perceived as being good, basically, was my mother, and everything which is perceived as being bad, minus some maybe spots within the bad which were good still, but the overall picture that I had of my father was that it was a bad source. And basically that space at the beginning were kind of equal. I had one space which was my mother, which was equal as the space which was my father, which was the bad, and my mother was the good. So those two spaces in my mind were kind of equal, meaning that when my mother was there, I was secure in a space which let me express myself in a way which didn't make me perceive the outside world as being as of a menace as I perceive now. Because as soon as time went on, as I grew within my body, within myself, as the identity, the personality system that I became, this space that I preferred, because I didn't prefer the other space as the space which was bad that my father expressed to me. As soon as I grew up, I realized that the space of my mother was really something rare in this world, that there was nothing in this world which resembled my mother. My mother was so loving and so caring and so protecting that basically that space that was equal when I was younger, when I first started to identify, to build my identity, meaning the space of the goodness in me as my mother and the badness in me as my father were equally, like the size was equal. But as soon as I grew, that size shrunk. The size of my mother shrunk, and the size that my father represented grew bigger and bigger. So basically the bad grew bigger and the good grew smaller. But me, I didn't want to go in the bad. I didn't want to identify myself as my father, basically. I didn't want to identify myself as someone who hurts people, because I lived the pain of being beaten up by something or someone who was bigger than me, was stronger than me. And all I wanted to do was to be like my mother, because my mother was so good, and I saw myself as being so good. I saw myself as wanting to help people like my mother helped me. I didn't want to acknowledge the fact that the source as my father, I mean, the bad of my father existed in this world. I neglected it. I suppressed that part in me. I said it's not real, it doesn't exist. The only thing that exists is my mother as me. The only thing that exists is my mother, because as soon as I was away from my mother and within my father's grasp, I was afraid, because I knew that I had to check everything I did, because I knew that my father could notice anything that I did as being an excuse to beat me. It could be maybe that I let some crumbles on the counter, and he said, "Look, clean those crumbles," and then he whipped me because I didn't clean it in time. Or I don't know. It just seems to me back then that everything that I did was could be used by my father as an excuse to beat me. So I was always in fear of my father, and I always wanted to be with my mother. So early on, I identified myself as being my mother, an extension of my mother, the goodness of my mother, because I didn't feel good within within the space that I was in when I was with my father. But that space where I was in when I was with my father has become a space in my mind. As the space where I was in when I was with my mother became a space into which I identify myself in my mind. So those two spaces competed against each other, and as who I wanted to be, I didn't want to be like my father, I wanted to be like my mother, so I always was inclined to go into the space where I felt secure. And going back to what I was saying relative to the fact that in the morning I still feel in that space where something will take care of things for me instead of me taking care of things for myself, comes from my childhood. Because at first that space, my mother defended me against my father, or defended my will. She explained how I wanted things to be like, and my father had to agree because my mother, basically they were in a relationship and he couldn't beat my mother or whatever, so he was open to what she said, but he was not open to what I had to say. So I always relied on my mother to defend myself. And my mother became, later on, because I soon learned that it was no use to express myself towards the source which is against me, or which I perceive as being against me, like my father, because he beaten me. So it was no use, because even if I said please stop, or if I cried and I say you're hurting me, he continued. So I learned early on that it's best not to speak. And what I did when I didn't speak in front of my father is I suppressed myself within the area that my mother represented in my mind, and that area shrunk and shrunk and shrunk. So basically it shrunk, but I stick to it because I felt secure inside her space. I felt secure because I felt that she will take care of things for me. But now she's not there. And as I grew, the expression that my mother had to protect me became the expression that my body expressed as a protective, or as what I perceived as being a protection of me. So I secluded myself in my mind, and my body expressed this seclusion to the outside world by basically having non-verbal communication, non-verbal language, which tells other people don't bother him. He doesn't want to be bothered. He doesn't want to deal with other people, because somewhere he perceives other people as being a menace to his sense of security. And that's what I have become, basically. I have become that being, that body, which when I awake in the morning, when I sleep basically at night, when I rest myself, when I dream, I fall inside that space again, but in the core of the space where I'm in the protective presence of my mother. So when I awake in the morning, I still am in that space, which is the space of my mother in my mind. But since that space has become a space where I don't want to express myself, because I fear that if I express myself, people will make fun of me and people will hurt me. Well, will make fun of me first, or because they will see that I have difficulty in speaking because I've never really expressed myself as myself expression, my self-honest expressions ever since I was a child, because my father beat me when I expressed myself, my will. So I kind of learned early on that it's best not to express my will, and it's best to wait that my mother comes and she will express my will and she will defend me. So I kept this kind of psychology, mental state, and I kept it at school. When I was threatened, I hid in my mind, and since my mother wasn't there then, I kind of relied on my body language to express to others that, well, to protect myself from others, even though they may have beaten me sometimes, a few times, but they were harassing me and abusing me verbally. I kind of shrunk in my expansion awareness, and I shrunk inside that space in my mind, which told me that my mother is there. Wait, which told me basically, wait that your mother comes. She will help you when she will talk for you when she will be there, and you don't have to speak now, because you know that if you speak now, it will only get worse. Because if you speak now, your father will continue beating you. Your father will continue abusing you verbally, and it's no use trying. You've already tried in the past when you were a child, and it's no use. You know it's no use. So I kept that. So going back to now, to here, the problem I have is that this point is still there within me, because I apply self-forgiveness, and true, there is really a lot of changes that occurs after I apply good self-forgiveness sessions. But usually the changes stay with me until I go to sleep. The problem is my sleep, because every time I sleep, I awake feeling maybe a bit better than I did before, like a few days or a few months ago. I mean, feeling a bit better about myself, better about my self-expression. That's what I did feel about myself before I started joining Destiny. But still, there is this feeling that I am still in that space inside me which waits for my mother to help me, which waits for my mother to come and rescue me from this world where there's pressure coming from all angles, telling me that I have to be someone that I don't want to be, that I have to work even if I don't want to work, that I have to make money even if I don't want to make money. So all my life I've been waiting for my mother to come and save me from this world, because the world has become my father. And I'm still waiting, because I'm afraid that I cannot express to the world my will, because I fear that if I express my will to the world will reject me, will make fun of me, will make fun of my expression, exactly the same as what my father did to me when I was younger. He made fun of my expression, he made fun of my self-expression when I expressed myself as the pain that I experimented while my father was beating me. My father laughed at me. He said, "Oh, look at that, he's angry," and it made him laugh even more when I was showing how painful I was, how painful it was for me to live what my father imposed on me. So I learned that basically, and since it was constant, it's not like it was like one occasion he laughed at me when I expressed myself. He laughs at me all the time. So I stopped expressing myself. And now I'm just learning to express myself as who I am, really. And it's a process, it's a challenge, because even though self-forgiveness works, because like I said, when I self-forgive myself, I really feel afterwards that I'm kind of free, and instead of being in that small, tiny space where I normally find myself when I want to protect myself from this world, that space grows and encompasses my father inside me. So basically both spaces, I mean the tiny space, the tiny atom-like space, which have become of where I feel secure, and the surrounding space, the infinite surrounding space, which I've become of this universe and this world, as my Father, as the opposing will, as the will which opposes my will. Well, after self-forgiveness, both become one. Like, I don't see any distinctions between the tiny area where I find myself secure and the greater area that I perceive as being a menace, a constant menace, always telling me that I need to do stuff to survive, and that the stuff that I need to do is stuff that I don't want to do. After self-forgiveness, it becomes one. And I feel like an opening from here, my chest, which kind of expand, and really a warmth, like I already said in past posts in the forum, that I always feel a warm sensation here, really warm, like I see it as a star. I don't know what a star feels like, but it's a feeling which, in my imagination, I relate to a fire within that keeps on burning. But when I do self-forgiveness, this fire kind of expands, and it kind of fills me, and I feel like, not that I feel like in peace. Well, yes, I feel stable. I feel that I can express myself. I feel that I don't have to fear anything, anybody, because that feeling, that fire, doesn't waver when it's open. It stays stable. It makes me feel secure, whatever I do, whatever I say, whatever happens. But this fire, as soon as I sleep, as soon as I go to bed, as soon as I wake up in the morning, I feel as if it's distant, because I feel that I slip back into that area in my mind when I dream, which makes me fear the outside. So I wake, I fear my self-expression, because I fear that I won't be noticed. I feel that I won't be accounted, that my expression won't be accounted by people around me. I feel that it doesn't matter if I speak, I will still still have no power in this world, as I had no power in front of my Father, even though I expressed as the words that I was then. I expressed myself, I don't have the term, but I expressed that I didn't want him to do that, and he kept on doing it. So this child is still in me when I wake in the morning, and he says to me, without saying to me, because it has become so extensive, this suppression of my self-expression, that now, instead of being expressed through words, it's expressed to a kind of like filter, kind of a buffer. It's like there is fields of cotton surrounding me, which is kind of since I'm French, I don't have all the words that I'm trying to express right now, but it's kind of a bumper. There's kind of a bumper surrounding me, and like the stimuli that comes from the outside, which may be menacing, is filtered through those layers of bumpers as cotton surrounding me. And when the stimuli reaches me within this secluded space where I feel secure, the words is lost. The word expressing the stimuli has been so diluted that it becomes abstract, complete abstraction. And I don't know where the stimuli comes from. I don't know, because I feel secure, or I believe I feel secure, because all of the cotton-like filters that I placed all around me in order to feel secure in my tiny space. But like I said, I'm like this in that space. I say, no, not again, this world. Please, mother, make it go, make him go away. But it's still there. So every time I wake up, I have this. So it's a challenge. It's a challenge because I need to wake up and express myself. I don't mind. Doesn't matter what I say. Just say, no, I don't. I'm not accept and allow myself to limit my self-expression. As soon as I wake up, say that. I do not accept and allow myself to limit my self-expression. I am self-trust. I am confidence. I am worthy of expressing myself. I am here. I'm not in the past. Well, I'm not in the past.